Everybody. My name is Jonathan Leake. I'm the data architect for the St. Louis Regional Data Alliance. We are a nonprofit organization that works on open data initiatives. We believe that data should be used to help our communities, and so we work to make it more available and more usable. So what I'm going to be talking to you about today is we're actually in the middle of a pilot program, or a pilot for our partnership program. So, what is it? So if you've ever worked with consultants, or if you know any consultants, the big consulting firms have what they refer to as bench consultants, right? The consultants are on a salary, but they don't always have clients. They'll roll off one client, and it'll be a couple weeks before they find your next contract. So our program allows these consulting firms to donate the developer time during those 1, 2, 3 weeks to us to work on civic and nonprofit projects. Typically, these projects are too big for the nonprofit or government to do themselves, but also they just don't have the funds to make that happen. What the consulting firms get out of it is we train their consultants on a lot of the open source tools that we use. Obviously, it's a great way to give back to the community, and everything we do is open source. So if you're a consultant, most of your work is locked behind an NDA, which can make it a little challenging when you need to go to the find the next client, and they want to see examples of your work. And you're like, well, the last 5 years I've been working at a client, and I signed a contract that says I can't show you anything that I did. They can share everything they do with us. Everything I do is open source. Most of it goes straight into the public domain so that everybody can use it. So what we're working on right now for the pilot is the regional entity database. So have any of you worked with civic data before, or gone to the city's open data portal? Right? So the model that you see in most cities is even cities that are really good at open data, their open data portal is just kind of a dumping ground for operational data. So they take the access databases, the CSVs that they use to do their jobs, and they make it publicly available. But it often lacks data definitions. It's structured for operations rather than analysis. So it can be hard to join. It's just typically fairly hard to work with, but obviously represents a very rich and very valuable data set. So we're using a tool called Talon, which is an open source ETL tool, to convert it into a structured relational database designed for analysis. So rather than you having 2 different permit databases, each of which has 3 different permit tables based off of, there's a plumbing table, a mechanical permit table, and we're just going to have one permit table because they all have the same type of information. And realistically, if you're not the government and you're interested in permits, you're just interested in permits. You don't care who issued the permit. You don't care what type of permit. I mean, you do from an analysis perspective, but they shouldn't be structured differently. They're the same type of information for you. So that's what we're building. To do that, we're writing processes that go from the city's open portal to an S3 bucket. From there, it gets pulled in, it gets dumped as pure strings. We convert everything to a string, we dump it into our staging tables. From the staging tables, we go to a second layer of staging tables for historical reasons. So the open data portal does not contain any historical context. They just write over. When they upload the permits database, they write over the old permits database. So you lose that historical context. We're trying to recapture that. So we need a second layer of core so that we can, or the staging layer, so that we can build that out. And then finally it goes to core, which is what we're going to end up building all of our tools off of. Some of the things that this platform is going to end up powering, stlvacancy.com is a website I've built over the last 2 years that looks at vacancy in the St. Louis area. Every vacant building and lot is in there with details about who owns it and what condition it's in, that sort of stuff. Yeah?
Can you say that website name again?
stlvacancy.com. But right now it's out of date because I haven't updated it since last June 2018. Once we have it built off of this, it will update automatically and it will always be up to date with the most current information. Another thing we want to build is some kind of lovingly referred to as Carfax for houses. I think it's kind of ridiculous that I can find out every accident my car's ever been in, but when I go to buy a house, I can't find out all the code violations and permits that have been applied for through it, at least not easily, so we're going to build that as well. And yeah, that I think about covers, we got more details about like how it works, so I can talk about that, but it's operational details. Yeah, I guess questions. What questions do people have?
All right, hold on. Hold on, let's wait for the microphone. I'm sure people do have questions. And who would like to start? Oh, of course.
Great presentation. I have a question. When it comes to like different cities, like actual plans that they create, they basically pay a lot of money for consulting firms to create these big plans.
Yep.
Right now, like I sit on a board where they're doing that, like as far as development. Can this possibly also take a lot of the big data from those plans and make it more transparent for the public to be able to meet different needs within the plans that they've created, instead of like where it's just sitting on a shelf, but be able to say, hey, I can take a piece of that and implement this whenever is my specialty.
Yeah, I think long term, definitely. Well, we're kind of our plan is we're starting with parcel related information.
Okay.
So things that permits, code violations, inspections, assessments, that sort of thing. Things that refer to plots of land and buildings. But once we have that done, we're looking at other kind of domain areas, because obviously this isn't the only piece of, like, that's not the only kind of domain that there's a bunch of government data that isn't super well organized. So that would be an excellent area. We're looking at like emergency services data. It's kind of really hard to capture. Stuff like infrastructure, right? Where are all the fire hydrants? Like that list doesn't exist anywhere. And we'll just kind of do it one by one and design these individual entity databases to interact with each other so that it's easy for you to compare. You know, when we get to the plans, we'll convert them over so that they'll be able to use the same IDs and table structure that we use for the entity database. So you can be like, oh, this structure is going to get affected by this plan. Let me go and find out and see if they've applied for any permits related to this plan.
Okay. Could this also be overlaid with also geospatial data as well?
Yeah, we're holding off on geospatial data for a little bit, mostly because of my expertise is with relational data. But we do 100% plan to do that.
I would like to know how you plan to make money with this. And I was also thinking that any banks that have foreclosures would want to input to your data, as well as all the community development corporations that are looking to buy vacant houses.
Yep. I'm working with the St. Louis the Vacancy Collaborative, which has a lot of those entities represented on it as consumers of this data. In terms of how we're making money, we're a nonprofit. I kind of don't have to. I mean, I do. We have to fund ourselves.
Still need to get
Yes.
grants or
Yep.
something.
So what we're looking at partnering with some of the larger organizations. So what we found through getting this pilot off the ground is that there are a lot of companies in the St. Louis area that want to contribute to this city, to our community, but they found it very onerous to deal with the government bureaucracy, the thousands of nonprofit entities that exist, that operate in a very different way than the businesses are used to dealing with. We're acting as kind of that buffer layer, where we can deal with all the nonprofits, we can deal with the government bureaucracy, and they can just contribute their time and expertise to tackle these projects. So while I have a decent-sized team of developers, I'm the only one actually drawing a salary right now, along with there's two other people working on other parts of the organization. But our financial needs are actually relatively low, and we actually are looking at, we're going to be starting our fundraising round soon to hopefully fund us for the next couple of years. Again, looking to these larger corporations that are interested in giving back and are looking at making it more efficient to give back. And that we think that's where our funding's going to.
Yeah, I would hit the banks hard.
Yeah. Yeah.
Other questions?
So how far along is our open databases from changing the world?
So
Are we still in the very infantile stages of open databases and open information changing the world, or are we far along?
It depends on the type of data that you're looking at. The biggest big success in open data right now, there are a few. Like Wikipedia obviously is huge. Like everybody uses that. OpenStreetMap, huge, tremendous open data success. If you're not familiar with it, OpenStreetMap is basically Wikipedia does Google Maps. It's a map data set that anybody can use and anybody can edit. And so rather than relying on huge amounts of data collection from satellite imagery, they do use some open source satellite imagery, but for the most part, it's me in my car with my iPad drawing streets. But that's been immensely successful. But in terms of changing people's lives, well, OpenStreetMap drives, at least in part, almost every navigation service you've ever used pulls from. Google pulls from OpenStreetMap. They don't rely solely on it, but they pull it in and they use it. That's part of what makes up Google Maps. All the public transit data. So those of you who are my age will remember a time when Google Maps did not know how to navigate public transit. So if you wanted to take a bus, you had to navigate bus schedules and train schedules and all of that. That has been, there's now an open standard for that called GTFS. I think it was Austin, Texas created it. Google backed it. Once everybody started adopting it, now it's very easy to access public transit data for every city, and it makes sense for Google to include it in Google Maps. So we're hoping that we'll be able to do the same thing with some of this parcel data. Is we'll be able to provide a very solid framework and say this is a good way to structure this type of data, and then hopefully get some larger corporate backer to kind of say yes, we agree. Let's start helping other cities implement this, so that Carfax for houses tool can just exist for every city in the United States. But it takes time. It's a little slower, and it's mostly based off of volunteer efforts. And what we found is that my counterpart in most cities is an urban planner or a social worker that has learned a little bit of code, whereas I'm a programmer that has learned a little bit of how government works. So it puts St. Louis in kind of a unique position that we're coming at it from a technology first perspective. So.
All right. So I was going to take a question. So are there other cities that are doing something similar to this? I mean, you just alluded to it.
So I haven't found anybody building the entity database, but that doesn't mean that nobody's doing it. Just means I haven't found them yet. There are cities that have very good open data initiatives, but by very good, I mean they've got well-designed portals that still have that same operational data, but they've at least done a really good job of putting data definitions to it, so it's a little more usable. But it's still not structured as one, unified chunk. It's dozens of access files and CSVs and things like that. They've just at least given you labels so you know what everything is.
Yeah, I stole BJ's question, so sorry about that. So do we have any more questions? Okay, hold on.
So how do we as citizens help participate in collecting data for our city?
Oh, that is an excellent question. So, in terms of collecting data, your best bet is to join an existing open source initiative. OpenStreetMap is a good, easy one to get involved with. They have phone app, they have mobile apps, they have tablet apps, you can do it on your computer, and it's literally as simple as you go to their website, they pull up an open source satellite image, and you trace streets, you trace sidewalks, you trace houses, and you say, this is a house, this is a sidewalk, etc. That's a great way. We used to do mapathons where we would actually go to the Loop. We'd all meet at a coffee shop. And we'd just do that for the Loop, right? Contributing, if you're a developer, contributing code-wise. St. Louis Regional Data Lines, we have a GitHub. Everything I do is open source. You can see what's there, start to contribute in whatever capacity you know how. Alternatively, just reach out to me, and we'll talk about like what your skill sets are and see where we can kind of plug you in. But the biggest thing is just start building. I got started in all of this because I went to a hackathon where the mayor asked for visualizations of vacancy, and I determined, me and my team very quickly realized that nobody was going to be able to accomplish it because the data was a dumpster fire. So we didn't even try. Instead, we put together a proposal for this. And then I spent 2 years building that vacancy dashboard that was asked for, but in a very static way based off of the data that was available. Because I've now been able to use that kind of as a crowbar to get better support, right? The city didn't even know I was working on it, so I showed up at like one of their meetings, was like, hey, vacancy portal, it exists now. But if you want it to update automatically, these kind of changes need to be made. And like, if you want this piece of, if you want to know this about a vacant property, you need to open source that data. But because I've already demonstrated that I provide value, they're a lot more willing to like work with me, and it's kind of blossomed from there. So, yeah.
Hey, thanks. So when you crowdsource some of these data sets, how do you validate the veracity of the data?
I'm not crowdsourcing any data. All the data I'm getting is coming from the St. Louis City Open Data Portal. I'm just cleaning it up and restructuring it. But OpenStreetMap, I just went to their conference. The way they validate their data is basically everybody it's a very Wikipedia-style model where anybody can edit. So if something is wrong, there are more people that want it right than there are trolls that want it wrong. So the biggest errors they tend to have is stuff that's out of date, because somebody will put, like a new school goes in and nobody has like added it to the map yet, or a road, there was construction and a road moved 3 meters to the left and nobody's updated it. They do have dedicated teams. They have the Humanitarian OpenStreetMap Task Force, I think is what it's called, but they have a dedicated team that specifically does edits on areas that are being affected by natural disasters, because it's a great way to contribute to help some people that are in need without actually being there, right? When there's an earthquake in Nigeria, I can't fly to Nigeria and help them. I don't have that kind of money. I can't take time off of work. What I can do is I can spend my night cleaning up the map so that the people that are there can better distribute resources and know what's going on and be able to navigate. And so they've got a dedicated team that does that.
And are you going to eventually partner with someone like Google for something like this, or for maybe the next iteration, or?
I mean, I would love to. I've been in this job for 8 months, so I can't really say. We don't know where it's going to go. I mean, right now my grant funding runs out in June. So I would love to do that. But it would be very presumptuous of me to say, yeah, we're totally going to do that.
Right.
But, I mean, we hope to. Yeah.
Right. So if anyone has a connection to Google, there you go. It's a good connection, right? All right, any more questions? No? All right, thank you very much.